I'd like to now begin questions in 7-minute rounds, and I'll remind all of us we have a scheduled vote at 11:15 and following a second panel witness. If I might start, I'd just like to begin with a direct question to each of you. You've addressed this in longer form, but if I could just have in the interest of time, concise and direct answer. When did your agency make its first offer of assistance after the kidnappings? What did that offer entail? What was the Nigerian government's response? And what do you see as the real impediments towards the Nigerians taking full advantage of the opportunities and resources we've offered? Ambassador Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Kerry called President Jonathan roughly 2 weeks ago today, made the offer, which President Jonathan accepted with alacrity, and it involved intelligence collection and support and other resources that I described in my testimony.
Assistant Administrator Guest.
Almost immediately after the incident, the Embassy and USAID declared a state of emergency, which allowed us to bring in additional resources and assessment teams. So that was one way. The second was our administrator almost immediately traveled, after the incident, traveled to Nigeria to meet with the government, as well as participate in other discussions, but certainly did focus on this issue.
Thank you. Principal Director Finn.
Sir, the State Department took the lead in making the initial offers. However, once the government of Nigeria, in fact, accepted our offer of assistance, I believe that was on the 4th of May, the department had ISR overflight by the 9th of May.
Thank you. If I could, Ambassador Jackson, as you mentioned in your testimony, in 2012, the State Department deliberated over whether to designate Boko Haram as an organization, as a foreign terrorist organization, or to designate top leaders, which indeed happened in 2012, and then the group as a whole as an FTO the following year. What were the implications of designating those 3 individuals in 2012, and what additional steps have been taken by the administration to target Boko Haram's funding and other sources of support, and why was there not initially unanimity around designating the whole organization?
Senator, the debate about whether to designate Boko Haram dates back many years, till at least 2011. And I think as former Assistant Secretary Johnny Carson has explained in media interviews, the debate was really about the Nigerian attitude toward designation. The government of Nigeria feared that designating these individuals and the organizations would bring them more attention, more publicity, and be counterproductive. For some time, we accepted that point of view, and the fact that the Nigerians are only now asking the UN to designate them continues to reflect Nigerian hesitancy over the impact of these designations. But we decided to move ahead in 2012 precisely because we were convinced that they met the criteria for designation.
Thank you. If you would, Assistant Administrator Gast, describe the strategy of the Nigerian government to address the root causes of Boko Haram support in northern Nigeria. The hearing that we conducted 2 years ago could almost literally be repeated today in terms of ongoing structural challenges that have led to this insurgency and have created the conditions and sustained and in some ways accelerated the conditions for Boko Haram.
As the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary mentioned in his testimony, there is a realization within the national security, among the national security group, including the security advisor himself, Dasuki, that this is a major concern. And so there are 2 units within the National Security Advisor's office that are working on developing plans for the North. One, a massive, long, multi-year development program. Another one that would help address the immediate concerns of security, community development. We're advising those two groups and helping identify areas where we can assist in providing programming support.
Girls in Nigeria and around the world are risking their lives every day just to get an education. USAID does deliver significant support for education opportunities, and in particular for the inclusion of women and girls in education. But with a decline in USAID's funding request for education programming, I'm concerned we may not have enough resources to do what we should and what we must in Nigeria and elsewhere. USAID's support is predominantly focused in Bauchi and Sokoto states, as you said, a small portion of the total North. Please speak, if you would, to the strategy for how to continue to support education which really is the root cause of a lot of the violence in this instance, the insistence on access to education for women?
Education has always been a robust element of our program support in Nigeria. And if one were to look at the continent as a whole, the budget for education in Nigeria represents about 10% of the entire education budget. So it is a significant contribution that we're making. The question is, are we placing the resources in the right areas? And certainly because of access issues, it's extremely difficult to program resources in the north. We are working with DFID, the British Development Agency, and we believe we're very close to announcing a major effort to support education, primarily girls' education, secure education in the north.
Thank you. Principal Director Friend, tell me more, if you would, about the Trans-Sahel Counterterrorism Partnership and what we've done regionally with other countries that are directly affected by Boko Haram, Chad, Niger, Cameroon. And if you would, just as a last question, you mentioned the gross human rights violations committed by some elements of the Nigerian armed forces. We are still able to find units with which we can partner, and it is still possible for the Nigerian military, police, and security forces to take the lead in ensuring the safe return of the Nigerian schoolgirls. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir. I'll take those questions in reverse. That is correct. I mentioned in my testimony the Ranger Battalion that we will begin training, in fact, this month, and pre-training programming has begun to lay in the groundwork for that. So we are able to find units inside the Nigerian armed forces that in fact pass Leahy vetting and have passed Leahy vetting. It is, however, a persistent and very troubling limitation on our ability to provide assistance, particularly training assistance, that the Nigerians so badly need. This is one of the things that we've been talking to them about for quite some time. Another recent engagement that was also interagency in nature was a counterinsurgency focused trip to Nigeria, I believe last fall, where we were urging them to take a more holistic approach and a frankly much less brutal approach in the north against Boko Haram. To your question of the Trans-Sahel Counterterrorism Partnership, it is a State Department-led effort, so I don't want to speak out of turn for Mr. Jackson, but I will say that in the region we have been working increasingly with the Cameroonians, the Nigerians, and the Chadians to talk about the regional threat that Boko Haram poses. As you, I'm sure, have heard in the press, there's some thought that some of the girls may have been taken over international borders. And of course, the border with Cameroon and Niger in particular is very porous. And we do know that Boko Haram does operate back and forth across the international border, particularly with Cameroon. The Cameroonian government and the Cameroonian president in particular have recently been taking Boko Haram even more seriously than previously, and we are working with them and with the Nigerians and the Chadians to assist them and to do everything we can to ensure that all these countries coordinate with each other.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Lantana Abdulali, we are grateful for your joining us today. You have experienced so much as someone from the North and as an advocate for peace building. How has Boko Haram impacted your life, the community around you in the North, and what message would you like to send to the perpetrators of these vicious attacks?
I think I want to talk first as a Muslim. I want to say the activities of Boko Haram has actually affected almost all Muslims, in Nigeria, because we've been left to actually start, talking about defending our faith and, educating and sensitizing people that Boko Haram do not actually represent Islam and do not represent the interests of Muslims in Nigeria. And of course, coming from where we are dealing with other conflicts in other locations like the North Central region, where we are dealing more with issues of ethnic and religious conflicts. Boko Haram has also taken advantage of that to also try to, perpetrate some of their terrorist activities, in some of these locations. And it has taken, a lot of, our efforts to make sure we localize the context and not allow Boko Haram to actually hijack the process and the work we are doing in Nigeria.
Thank you. As you know, many Americans have taken to the internet to express their outrage with Boko Haram and their support for safely returning, for bringing back the girls. And today's hearing is an expression in part of American concern and solidarity and commitment to support the families and the girls. What message do you have for us, for the U.S. government and the American people, as we consider what more we could do to support peace and security in Nigeria?
I think very importantly, we want to acknowledge the American people and government for coming to our rescue at this moment. We know of the military cooperation currently going on between America and Nigerian government. Even though, of course, the support or the request from Nigerian government for such support is coming late, but we still believe that the time is now to actually act. And in particular, we also need to look at other non-military support from the American government, particularly when we are looking at other community-driven peace-building strategies and approach to also consolidate on the post-abduction stage. We need to do that to rebuild the communities, but more importantly, we need to acknowledge that the Northeast region is one of the most backwards, regions in Nigeria. There's a weak media presence, there's weak civil society presence, and this means that we need to actually push to empower the communities to speak their voice, not to allow some people or institutions or groups to speak for them. So that's why we are actually pushing to see how we can have community level, driven radio stations, even though at this moment there's actually no license. The government is not issuing such license. But we think that the time has come to have community radios, to work with young girls, and to work with also women and youth.
Well, thank you for those comments. If you could tell us what other initiatives, in addition to the radio conversation, that your organization, the organization for which you work, Search for Common Ground, has taken, and as a peace builder, Lantana, what are the most important steps you have taken to encourage reconciliation and dialogue amongst the communities in the North? What are the most positive steps you have seen so far, and what recommendations do you have for us about how we can best support peace-building efforts in the North?
As you know, Search for Common Ground is an organization that is very innovative in its peace-building efforts around the world. And that innovation and uniqueness is what we have brought to deal with conflicts in many parts of Nigeria. Currently, we are working basically more in the Middle Belt region, trying to bring ethnic groups together to look at their common grounds values and to work on their differences. We are also, of course, supporting the federal government to work on the militancy problem and stability in the Niger Delta region. We've been supporting communities to sit and dialogue over their differences, using their own local initiatives. We've also been empowering them with skills and knowledge, particularly on conflict transformation, to be able to deal with those issues constructively.
So, Ms. Abdullahi, if you have any closing comments you'd like to make to us, we have to go back to the Senate floor in just a moment for another vote. I know it was a little disjointed between Senator Cardin, Senator Flake, and myself. If there's any closing comments you have for us, suggestions about how we can most be helpful in supporting reconciliation and development in the North that will address some of the root causes of the Boko Haram insurgency, or that can address some of the root causes of violence and of difficulties between communities, I would welcome that. And if you have any other suggestions for how we can best support the Nigerian schoolgirls who have been kidnapped and their families, we would welcome that as well. Thank you so much for your testimony. We look forward to a closing comment from you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to actually talk today. And of course, like I said earlier, we need a lot of support. There's currently weak presence of the civil society on ground to actually support the current crisis in the region. So we want the U.S. Senate to push to see how we can have more visible actions going on right now in the region by sorting out the humanitarian issues immediately, but also looking out to plan long-term interventions, working with youth groups, women groups, and young girls to promote civilian protection and to also promote human rights respect by armed forces and also under a community-driven approach.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your focus on peace building, on respecting human rights, and on reconciliation. We are grateful for the effort that you made to testify before us today. I will leave the record open for an additional week till the close of business Thursday, May 22nd, for any members of this committee who are not able to attend but who have questions either for our first or second panel. We greatly appreciate the testimony that was offered today by all four of our witnesses and the very hard work that many are doing here in the capital of the United States to provide support and assistance to the Nigerian schoolgirls and their families, to the people of Nigeria, and to all who are working for peace and reconciliation in Nigeria. Thank you, and with that, this hearing is adjourned.